it's harmful. It's harmful when politicians throw gas on the fire, and it's particularly harmful when the Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris, bails out of jail violent Black Lives Matter and Antifa rioters siding with the criminals instead of the cops.
Senator Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank each of the witnesses for being here today. Each of you put your lives on the line to keep us safe, and I view a very important part of my job as having your backs. It's tough right now to be a cop. I try to make a point with every police officer I see in Texas and across the country to thank every officer. The discussion Senator Cotton was just having, I hear that from young officers all the time, that the rhetoric, the demonization of police officers has a real consequence. We're in the grips of nothing short of a war on police. According to FBI data, 73 police officers were feloniously killed in 2021, a nearly 60% increase from 2020. And sadly, this trend has continued throughout 2022. As of June 30th, 178 officers were shot in the line of duty, 33 of whom were killed. But it's not just these shocking numbers, it's the way these shootings have come about. These aren't solely officers shot while intervening in a robbery or investigating a domestic disturbance, but more and more, we're seeing an increase in ambush-style attacks, where the shooting or killing of an officer is not incidental to some other crime, but rather it's the primary objective. It's the primary purpose of the crime. In 2021, there were 133 officers shot in 107 separate ambush-style attacks. And this increase in violence is fueled by dangerous and irresponsible rhetoric, including, sadly, by a number of members of Congress, who, whenever there is an officer-involved shooting, immediately move to demonize the cop, immediately move to blame the police officer without knowing the facts, without knowing what happened. It's always the officer. The incredibly reckless push to abolish the police that is driven by the left wing of the Democratic Party, I believe, has done enormous damage. And President Biden nominated not one, but two of the leading advocates of abolishing the police to be senior officials at the U.S. Department of Justice, Vanita Gupta and Kristen Clark. For both of them, they had repeatedly, explicitly, vigorously argued for defunding or abolishing the police. And every single Democratic senator voted to confirm both of them. So Democrat politicians in an election season say they don't support defunding the police, but when given a chance to decide, should one of the leading advocates of defunding the police be the number 3 person at the Department of Justice, 100% of Senate Democrats said, A-OK with me. Sergeant Penny, share for this committee what the effect of the rhetoric directed at police officers has been to the men and women in the field, to the men and women risking their lives to keep us safe.
It's been demoralizing for our officers in the field, the officers that's trying to work hard to keep us safe. We just got to go back to the July 7, 2016 shooting attack and look at how the rise of anti-police sentiment was being used to incite violence against police. That actually radicalized an individual to come into downtown Dallas to shoot multiple people and kill 5 police officers. And those of you that have never seen a shooting before, it's even worse to imagine the carnage that happened on that day. To see the officers coming into the hospital and being wheeled in over and over again, one after the other. And Senator, you were there. America needs to understand that these are real lives. Officers are people too. They're here to do a difficult job, and they just want to go home to their families. But we cannot allow this irresponsible rhetoric that's being used to proliferate radical messages online to incite violence against police because individuals are taking up arms and actually carrying out those attacks. So I encourage everyone, Senator, to be responsible, especially our leaders for this country. Be responsible in what they're putting out online because it's endangering our lives. Thank you.
Well, Sergeant Petty, that is powerful, and I agree with you. You're right. I was at the funeral for the 5 police officers in Dallas. It was horrific. In that instance, the gunman told police negotiators, quote, he was upset about Black Lives Matter, and, quote, he was upset about the recent police shootings, and that he was upset at white people. The suspect stated he wanted to kill white people, especially white officers. That vicious rhetoric, the false lies. We had a Biden judicial nominee testify, sitting at that table you're at, that police officers shoot unarmed black men in America every single week. It's a flat-out lie. It's completely false, and yet the Senate Judiciary Committee was the vehicle for spreading that lie. It's harmful. It's harmful when politicians throw gas on the fire, and it's particularly harmful when the Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris, bails out of jail violent Black Lives Matter and Antifa rioters siding with the criminals instead of the cops. Sheriff Bouchard, what does that do to the men and women of blue that are keeping us safe?
Well, thank you, Senator. In many ways, as was said, it demoralizes when you see people that have attacked police or have heard police get out on little or no bail. And I have often likened it to the similarity when our Vietnam vets came home, they were spit on and they were demonized, and they were men and women that were going to do a tough job that they were asked to do and then demonized for doing it. I think we pledged as a society we're not going to let that happen to our veterans again. Amen. So happy that happened. We're in the same place right now with police, and we're letting history repeat itself. We're letting good men and women that are out there doing a tough job get demonized and demoralized.
Thank you.
This committee, I believe, has had a consistent pattern of focusing on partisan priorities of Democrats at the expense of fulfilling our responsibility to the American people. When it comes to immigration, we've had not one, not two, but 3 hearings on amnesty. That clearly is the partisan priority of President Biden and Democrats in the Senate. We've had not a single hearing on the disaster, the catastrophe that is unfolding on the southern border. This week, news broke that was particularly chilling. The mayor of McAllen, Texas, announced that in the last 6 months, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have released over 7,000 illegal immigrants into McAllen who were COVID positive. The mayor further announced that last week, in 1 week alone, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris released 1,500 illegal immigrants into McAllen who were COVID positive. Now, to put this in perspective, the population of the city of McAllen in 2019 was 141,000 people. 7,000 illegal immigrants, all COVID positive, is roughly 5% of the population of that city. The mayor rightly declared it a disaster in South Texas. And at least to date, the answer from congressional Democrats is that nobody cares. The Biden administration is releasing thousands upon thousands of illegal aliens with COVID into communities, spreading the pandemic, and this committee's too busy holding hearings on amnesty to even hear testimony. Mr. Chairman, I would ask you to bring the mayor of McAllen up here to testify about the consequences in that community on the Rio Grande border of the Biden administration releasing thousands upon thousands of illegal immigrants who are COVID positive. It is wildly irresponsible, and it's dangerous. Secondly, in terms of priorities, the nomination of David Chipman raises very serious concerns because his record is that of someone with an extreme gun control agenda. Indeed, he argued that Senate Democrats' proposals to ban guns don't go nearly far enough, that he wants to go much further than, for example, Senator Feinstein's bill. He's entitled to those views, but those views are out of step with the mainstream of America. Since his hearing, even more disturbing information has come to light, in particular, two different sets of allegations. One, an article from The Reload, July 28, 2021, entitled, "ATF Agents Corroborate Existence of Racial Complaint Against Biden Director Nominee, Fear Reprisals, and Hit to Agency Effectiveness." And the article says, multiple ATF sources back up the existence of a complaint alleging President Biden's nominee to lead the ATF, David Chipman, made racist comments during his previous stint at the agency. The article goes on to quote one of those ATF agents, quote, "He made some comments that he was surprised by the number of African Americans who have made it onto a specific promotional list. So his insinuation was that they had to have cheated, which is kind of despicable." The article further quotes an ATF agent as saying, quote, "He left Detroit because of that. He did not leave Detroit on the best of terms. His reputation was that he was not nice to people." These are troubling allegations, and yet the chairman of this committee has said it's not worth the committee's time to have a hearing and to let Mr. Chipman answer these allegations. Apparently, Senate Democrats do not care if he made racist comments in his role in office as a supervisor. They do not care if he created a racially discriminatory and hostile environment by making racist comments. Now, he may have a defense on this, but if he does, we don't know it because this committee can't be bothered to have a hearing and ask him. So what this committee is saying is that allegations of racism, if you're a partisan Democrat, no problem at all. Not even worth asking about. Secondly, another story that is broken. This is from a story in Fox News on August 5th, 2021, entitled, "Biden ATF Nominee Chipman Failed to Disclose Chinese State TV Hit Used as Propaganda by the Communist State." And it explains that, quote, "President Biden's nominee to head the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives failed to disclose to the Senate a media appearance on Chinese state TV, which may have been used as propaganda by the communist state to cover up a mass stabbing of children." Now, the chairman defended that as saying, well, other people have gone on state TV, perhaps. Did Mr. Chipman know that he was going on a communist propaganda show? Did he know that it would be used as propaganda to tear down America? Did he know that it would be used as propaganda to cover up the atrocities in communist China? We don't know. We don't know because this committee hadn't had the chance to answer them, and what the committee leadership is saying is they don't care. Doesn't matter. Truth doesn't matter. We got a partisan agenda to do. Don't bother us with actually doing our jobs. And so I would ask unanimous consent that both of these articles be entered into the record.
Without objection, thank you very much, Senator, for your comments on favorably reporting the nomination.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not completed.
I'm sorry. How much more time do you need?
5 to 10 minutes. As I said, I wanted to talk about Myrna Perez.
She is the nomination before the committee.
Yes, that's what I'm prepared to talk about right now.
I hope the senator will be mindful of the other senator's time when he uses his own.
Well, I am mindful of the other senator's time. I'm also mindful that this committee spends a ton of time on things like amnesty and not time on doing our jobs. So this committee doesn't have time to look into allegations of racism, doesn't have time to look into allegations of participating in Chinese communist propaganda, doesn't have time to look into the Biden administration releasing thousands of illegal aliens with COVID, but we have time to move political activists forward to satisfy the partisan interest of Democrats in the Senate. Let's talk about this judicial nominees. President Biden's nominee to the circuit courts have been uniformly problematic. One nominee, Gustavo Gelpi, has demonstrated record of activism from the bench and has routinely made comments that are in conflict with Canon 3A6 of the Code of Conduct of Federal Judges. Another nominee, Eunice Lee, has zero experience practicing in civil cases, yet was nominated to a court where 83% of the new appeals are civil. The nominee couldn't even tell Senator Cotton when a litigant is entitled to a jury trial, much less how many people actually sit on a civil jury. And yet, out of all the circuit nominees that we have seen so far, Myrna Perez is the most dangerous. She has been a radical and an activist for what effectively amounts to her entire career, having spent the last 15 years advocating for extreme far-left positions. She has waged campaigns against voter ID laws, describing them as the greatest rollback of voting rights in the country, even though 80% of Americans support voter ID laws and 60% of African Americans support voter ID laws. Even though voter ID laws have been upheld as constitutional by the Supreme Court in an opinion authored by Justice John Paul Stevens, one of the great liberals to serve on the court. She has opposed voter integrity laws almost across the board. And she's not just opposed to them as a matter of law. She said anyone who disagrees with her radical views and believes in ensuring the integrity of our elections must be a racist. Just 5 months ago, she said that many of the voting laws being enacted across this country are due to, quote, anxiety over the browning of America, and people having anxiety over the fact that certain folks in power are not going to be able to stay in power. I'll tell you, the folks in power that want to stay in power is Democrats in the Senate who are trying to rig the game so the voters can't vote them out. Ms. Perez is opposed to laws that would prohibit ballot harvesting, a practice that invites fraud and abuse. She went so far as to say the Democratic Party's challenge to an Arizona law prohibiting ballot harvesting was clear-cut, and that an amicus brief that I led on behalf of 11 senators supporting that common sense law was, quote, outrageous and dangerous. Supreme Court, thankfully, did not agree with Ms. Perez's left-wing views, and indeed, by a vote of 6-3, agreed with the position advocated in my amicus brief, which is that common sense bills prohibiting voter harvesting are constitutional. Ms. Perez has also argued the Constitution requires allowing felons to vote, even though the 14th Amendment explicitly in the text recognizes that states have the ability to prohibit felons from voting. So never mind what's in the Constitution, she's prepared to read it to mandate the policy outcome she wants. Text be damned. Now, a shrewd observer may think, where have I heard all of these policy positions before? And the answer, of course, is S1, the Corrupt Politicians Act. If Ms. Perez is confirmed, she will be the judicial equivalent of a judge who will mandate the Corrupt Politicians Act. Never mind getting it through Congress. You may not have the votes in Congress, but if you put an activist judge on the bench, she can order the policy outcomes you like, never mind the law. Banning voter ID, you betcha she'd do it in a heartbeat. Requiring states to allow ballot harvesting, check. She's going to be there too. Allowing felons to vote, you betcha. Prohibiting voter integrity laws, 100%. And that's exactly what Democrats want on the bench. Democrats have a long history of trying to get through activist courts what they can't get through the democratic process. And that's what they're trying to do with Ms. Perez. They can't pass the Corrupt Politicians Act, so they're trying to do the next best thing, which is confirm a radical to the bench who will impose those policies from the bench. And the amazing thing is, Senate Democrats are not even hiding the fact that Ms. Perez has been nominated precisely because she will be a partisan from the bench. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, in a moment of raw honesty, went off script when introducing Ms. Perez at her hearing, and he said that he wants Ms. Perez on the bench because she will, quote, persuade fellow members of the Second Circuit to the righteousness of the causes that she will follow. Well, I appreciate Senator Schumer's candor. And if you were nominating someone to be a left-wing activist, this would be one heck of an endorsement. But this is damning for a judicial nominee. Chuck Schumer is telling Democrats this is going to be a righteous advocate of causes. Throw out all pretense of judicial objectivity. Throw out all pretense of following the law. She's going to be a left-wing activist. And it's not only Senator Schumer that has let slip Ms. Perez's political activism. Chairman Durbin praised an article she wrote entitled, quote, "The GOP Campaign to Make Elections Less Free." Chairman is nodding. He apparently thinks it's a good thing for federal judges to be blazingly partisan. Chairman Durbin said he would, quote, "gladly give her article as a speech from him personally on the floor of the Senate any day of the week." Mr. Chairman, I agree. You're a partisan Democrat. You're entitled to be a partisan Democrat. We shouldn't have judges that treat the judiciary like they're partisan Democrats. I will note Senator Leahy said a minute ago, the reason for Republicans' opposition is she's a woman. Now, call me crazy, but I seem to recall a hearing not that long ago for a judge named Amy Coney Barrett, who had extraordinary academic background, who had an extraordinary record, and who every Senate Democrat happily voted against, who Democrats on this committee asked Judge Barrett, "Have you ever sexually assaulted anyone?" That was a unique moment in the history of the Judiciary Committee. Democrats on this committee had previously said about her Catholic faith, the dogma lives loudly in this one. Now, I'm not going to suggest that that was because she was a woman, which is what Senator Leahy suggested of our concerns with this nominee. I'm going to suggest it's because Democrats want left-wing partisans on the bench, and Justice Barrett is not a left-wing partisan. Neither Senator Schumer nor Chairman Durbin is wrong about Ms. Perez. She's given us every reason to believe that she will continue her radical activism if she's confirmed. Nominees who care about the judicial role, who care about the appearance of bias, who care about demonstrating a judicial temperament, will take on a judicial role as soon as they even think about the possibility of becoming a judge. But Ms. Perez has demonstrated, even when she was in the process of being nominated to the court, she's a partisan, and a partisan she will stay. After she had submitted her judicial application, after she'd had multiple conversations with a member of Senator Schumer's screening committee, speaking with Senator Schumer's staff, personally interviewing with Senator Schumer to be a judge, she continued to engage in rank partisanship. About a week after interviewing with Senator Schumer, she spoke on a virtual panel where she said that voting integrity laws were the result of, quote, anxiety over the browning of America. Ladies and gentlemen of America, get ready for a judge in a robe who, if you disagree with her political policy, is going to call you a racist from the bench, because she was prepared to call anyone who disagreed with her a racist while she was interviewing to be a judge. Later, even deeper into the process, when she was in contact with the White House counsel's office, she disparaged originalists as, quote, people who think that we were at our best when our country was first founded and didn't include women or people of color or people without property in the electoral process. So apparently, Judge Perez is saying, Clarence Thomas, who's an originalist, thought we were better when people of color were not allowed to vote. She's saying Justice Barrett, who's an originalist, thought we were better when women weren't able to vote. What utter garbage. That's not what any rational, reasonable, fair-minded person says, but it is what a left-wing activist and extremist says. And she did this when she was deep into the process of being considered to be a federal appellate judge. Senator Schumer, Chairman Durbin are both right. This nominee is and always has been a left-wing activist. And if she's confirmed to the Federal Court of Appeals, she'll continue to be a left-wing activist. Unfortunately, that's what our Democratic colleagues want. In a moment, we're going to vote on this judge, and I'm going to predict that every single Democrat is going to dutifully salute and say aye. Confirm the activist. To heck with judicial independence. To heck with judicial temperament. To heck with following the law. We have a left-wing partisan agenda, and we want judges to force them on the people. Never mind democracy. Never mind the will of the voters. We want to exercise power. When it comes to priorities, I think that is a profoundly misplaced priority.